Just give me a second. I'm going to share my screen and I'm just going to show you. And once we're done with that, I'm going to upload and create the folders later this evening. So let me just share my screen. Okay. Need to just indicate that if you can just see my screen, I'm going to share subject guide. Can you see my screen? You should be seeing a subject guide for this year. Anyone?
Not yet, ma'am.
Okay, let me just try again. Okay, so I'm going to actually then convert it into PDF and upload it just to be on the safer side. Save as PDF. Oh, sorry, I realized I was on mute. Okay, let me then start again. So this is your subject guide. The lecturer, then you have your internal moderator. As you would be knowing, the internal moderator basically is the one who has the authority to override the marks given by a lecturer, or to amend or suggest changes. Um, so because it is an integration of 4 subjects, so the internal moderator is the same for all 4 subjects within BUT 360S. So it's management, retailing, finance, and entrepreneurship. Now, this is the book that I have put as a prescribed book because it's quite basic, and because you all are doing it for the first time as supply chain management, it's simple and easy to understand. You will get a copy of this in the library as well. I'm not sure of the e-copy, but because the libraries are open, so you can go look for the books or read further on. Then in here, there is a recommended book, which is currently only available in the District 6 campus library. So I make sure that I include content that I feel that I should touch base on. And if there is more that you need to know, you need to then read. That's why in recommended readings, it says articles and books from libraries, similar books, online pages like basically your LinkedIn and Google Scholar, where you need to research and gather more information on if it is part of your assessment, or if you are those students who are interested to know more about this subject and the chapters that are covered. The learning objectives for this subject that you should be knowing by the end of this course or this subject, which is mentioned here. Like I said, I will be uploading the subject guide so you can read them. I don't have to go through each and every one. Then we have the breakdown of assessments. As you can see, there is no date mentioned here. Um, and the reasons you all would be knowing very well because the dates have been shifted. So I have to work around and make sure. So which would mean that your assessments would be almost almost finishing March. So you'll be basically having 2 assessments in April for my subject and the final one in May perhaps. But that is again tentative. Once I have the final dates, I'll let you know. What else? The weightage, 30, 30, and 40% is the breakdown of weightage for this subject. Then we go down to what we're going to cover in this year or in the next just over a month. So these are the chapters that we're going to cover, discuss, and touch base on. Understanding that we have very little time available, so I'm actually going to pre-record the presentations and I'm going to upload it at least a day before. Now you are expected to listen to those recordings before you come to the session. I will make sure that on Monday mornings for the next few weeks, I start the session at least half an hour late so that you will have at least half an hour in my class hour for the ones who don't have time for various reasons to listen to the recordings, that you listen to this and then come to the session. What will happen then? So if there is any questions, if there is something that you don't understand, you want me to elaborate on it, I will do that. And then we can work on some case studies and discuss. I will try, I'm not promising, but I'll try to get a teaching assistant who can give you some sort of support Monday afternoons after the class. So perhaps 1:30 or 2 in the afternoons on Mondays from next Monday onwards, where he or she can go through some practice activities and practice exercises with you. Now that is compulsory, but if you are not attending, if you are not willing to attend, that is completely up to you. Because this is something that I'm going to add on as an extra for the class. So it's almost mandatory for you all to attend. It's a tutorial session. So this is how from next Monday onwards we're going to have our sessions like. Moving on to the next chapters, we have, if I'm not wrong, like about 8 chapters. So which would mean that there would be 1 or 2 sessions where I have to squeeze in 2 chapters. So you have to be on your toes to make sure that you make up for what is being taught. So that's all about the subject guide. Any questions so far from anyone? No one's got no questions? Okay, good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start today's chapter, which is Introduction to Supply Chain Management. And I'll make sure that we finish that chapter as well. Just going to share my screen just now. Okay, so I'm making sure that I am enhancing the font size of my screen just so that if you are using various gadgets, you are able to view it. But you are also on your end, as Blackboard allows you to zoom in your slides if you are not able to view them. So for today, we're going to discuss on Introduction to Supply Chain Management and Logistics. These are the learning outcomes of the chapter, which we will try and cover. So when we're speaking about supply chain management, the basic and simplest examples that I can relate you all with would be um, moving or getting a transport to move from one point to another. Ways where you, even if it means going from your home to your, or from your rest to the university or to the local supermarket, but you want to go quickly and also at the same time you want to go cheaply, which means as less price as you can pay. Now you can't say I want to walk because it's close by and I don't have to pay at all, then that's not going to fit in here. So the idea is to make sure quicker and of a lower price. Then another example is you want cold drinks, you go to the close by vending machine that you see at your fuel stations or filling stations, and you see other products at the shops. Now the difference there would be you would quickly get what you want. You might not get it in a cheaper price because they will have their own markups, as they are making sure that they're bringing the products close to the closest doorstep possible, and the most convenient place where everyone goes, which is your petrol station or your filling station. Now, that is basically what your supply chain and logistics would be about. As the definition says, logistics is movement of products, physical movement of products, or physical movement of services in the shortest time period and at the lowest possible cost. From where? From a point of origin, which is from where you're starting, to the point of consumption. So it would mean point of origin, if you consider an example from my industry, it would mean the point from where um, we are sourcing our raw materials, which is the supplier. That is your point of origin. And the point of consumption is we as consumers, where we buy it from the retailers and we make sure that we bring it and consume it. So that is your logistics. So movement. And how is movement going to possible? Obviously, we're going to use a mode of transportation or a carrier that is going to make this movement possible. Now, this would require a group of people. Now, to manage that group of people, there would be someone who is leading that group. So, which then come together as partners, and they are now teams. And these partners are called as supply chain partners that get involved and work together to ensure that the work is coordinated well and it is integrated well. Then, what is the reason for doing that? The slide here is a bit weird. I think that's only because of its uploading on Blackboard. However, when you see it as a presentation, when I upload, you will be able to read it properly. Now, what the slide says, I'm going to read it to you. Excuse me. Now, the main reason why entrepreneurs are trying to manage their organizations, or why they are ensuring that they run their business, is to obviously maximize their profit. Now, company or organization running business is definitely firstly to make profit, and then after that it is also to provide its end products or its merchandise to consumers, and ultimately when we buy from them we get our profit. So profit in this term is calculated as the difference between the revenue generated and the operating cost that it incurs, which means your selling price minus your cost price is your profit. So which means, for example, if you're selling a product for 100 Rand, but to make the product, you actually manage to make it for 70 Rand, then 100 minus 70 basically becomes your profit. So that is the amount of profit that you are making for your product. So entrepreneurs establish, or they operate, or they manage their organizations to earn and also to maximize their profit. Now, every year, make sure that they are ensuring that their profit is maximized every year. So profit, like I said, is revenue. Now, what is revenue? Revenue is your price times the quantity sold minus your cost price. So that is the profit that companies make. And this is what was there in the slide. Then we touch base on competitive advantage. Second year in marketing, we have done that. Why a product or a service is preferred over others. So obviously it has some advantage, or it is competitively advantageous than the other products. So hence, companies make sure that their product is having some unique feature or some unique selling proposition because of which it is preferred by consumers. Then making sure that we provide customers with a better service for the value or for money that they're paying for us. So obviously the result will be our consumers will prefer our product or service over the competitor's product or service. I will pause here before I start from further on if there are any questions so long. Okay, I don't see any hands or any questions. I'll go on. When we speak about logistics service providers, why do we need a provider for logistics? Now, any company can have their own fleet of vehicles. It can be those big container trucks, it can be normal carriers, it can be small mini trucks. The reason for having a service provider is because they are the ones who are specialized in the field of operation, so which would mean they would know timely delivery of products, they would know the value of time to each of the supply chain partners, and they will ensure that the product is reaching safely with necessary precautions at the point of consumption by picking it from the point of origin. So these logistics services also include your warehousing, it includes packaging, it includes transportation, and it includes IT. Now, IT is to connect all the dots. So all that happening needs to be communicated via a medium. It can be via software, it can be via emails. It depends what different companies opt for. So being in a market which is constantly competitive and being in a market which is global, we need to make sure that we reach the targets. We need to make sure that we satisfy our customers, we meet their demands, and at the same time give them improved quality products that contain latest technologies and also at the shortest time intervals possible. Now, you cannot come up with an idea or a concept or a technology and run it for 5 years and expect that your loyal customers or consumers are going to buy your products. So you have to make sure that you constantly upgrade them regularly as and when the technological advancements happen. So the roles that are played by logistics and supply chain management will ensure that on doing that, companies will have competitive advantage over their competitors. They will have a product or service that is unique than their competitors, that they earn maximum revenue, that they have low operating cost, and at the end, the profits that they obtain are at its highest. Now, the reason that we have supply chain or we have logistics as the key drivers is to make sure that we attend to most important things that is necessary for any industry or for any company, any organization in the market is the goal of efficiency and the goal of effectiveness to make sure that you are providing products at a reduced cost than your competitors and to make sure that you are satisfying your customers. If these two are attained at all times, they are the key mantra to make sure that you are holding on to the customers that you have or bringing in more customers by making sure that you achieve these two. It's almost like making sure if these two are achieved, that your fingers are crossed, that you are going to definitely make sure that you make profits year after year. And these are two examples um, to understand again supply chain logistics much better. I'm not going to read it. I'll pause a minute and I'll let you all to read and understand what I have spoken until now, if through these examples it makes sense. Okay. This is another, I'll rather keep it small so that you can see the whole process. Another simpler example of understanding the concept of supply chain from the point of origin to the point of consumption. Any questions from anyone so far? Are there any doubts?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Similarly, again, another example from a different industry where what can be a point of origin and what can be the point of consumption. Okay. Now, understanding the logistics, there are five rights, as we say, because we use the word right, and hence it's called the five rights of logistics. When a company is delivering its product, they have to make sure that it's in the right quantity, right quality, it is delivered at the right time, at the right place, and at the right price. So, which would means it would allow timely production of products at the lowest possible cost. So all five of these rights, they have to occur simultaneously to make sure that the supply chain is effective and is working successfully. Now, to understand the supply chain, as I said, it involves a group of partners. It would be your suppliers, it would be manufacturers. If there is a wholesaler, depends on the product, where it is made and where it is being delivered. There would be some middleman involved. Again, it depends where the product is made and where it is delivered. It would involve the retailers, the customers. So all of these form part of the supply chain. Now, each of these supply chain partner with their team, which can be a company or which can be a group of people, they need to work together to make sure that they are effectively functioning to give these five rights of logistics at a particular time or a particular set timeline. Then this is what we call as inbound and outbound flow processes in supply chain. Now we're going to study these as individual chapters as well. So what does happen when we say inbound and what happens when we say outbound? As you can see in this flow chart, there is an order that is being placed by customers. Now here a customer is not a consumer. It can be a buyer as well. Now the buyer identified for this season, for this collection, we need this particular style and this range of um, garments in such and such colors. On placing the order, that's when the manufacturer goes back to the supplier and say these are the raw materials or semi-raw materials that I would need from you. And on receiving that, the manufacturing process happens. There is selling and distribution, either directly to the customer or via distribution center, or what we also call as warehouse. That is your inbound, where information, that is your outbound, when an order has been placed and it goes to the customer at the end. Now, inbound is just the opposite, where there is movement of information backwards till the supplier, where they know what the order is going to be, or what the product that is going to be placed as order is going to be about. Now, that is what exactly I've explained in the slide clearly. Here, inbound and outbound flows. And if we're saying downstream and upstream of information. So the figure in the previous page basically explains this in the slide here. Okay. Now this is a flow chart that shows the steps in a logistics flow process, or it can be a channel of distribution. There might be 3 suppliers. Now, touching on that, a company might have n number of suppliers, because a company is not going to just need one supplier, because one supplier cannot provide all the raw materials that the company would need. So they would have more than one supplier who is going to provide them with the necessary products or raw material form products. So now a supplier A would have their own carrier. Now imagine that supplier is perhaps providing office supplies or stationaries. So they have their own little carrier that can deliver them once a month or once a quarter. Then there is a supplier B. Again, they have their own carrier, and it is supplying materials. For example, it can be trims. It can be, again, office stationery, maybe printing papers. It can be toiletries. It can be health and hygiene related products, and they have their own carrier. Whereas there is supplier C, which is using a third-party logistics. That's why I've written it 3PL, which is third-party logistics. We'll discuss about it again later now. If you see in supplier B, they have their own carrier. They are sending their products to the manufacturer. Now the manufacturer is making sure that the product is manufactured and is sending it to the customer. There might be times where the manufacturer, on completing their production, might store it in a warehouse or distribution center before the logistic carriers take it or transport it to the customer. So there can be different process flows in a supply chain. As I mentioned, I'm not going to read it. So these are the typical supply chain entities or partners or components that are necessary throughout the supply chain. I'm pausing here. Any questions from anyone so far? Okay. So moving on, and I'm going to show you an example of the different distribution channels and how it looks like. Just give me a minute. So this is an example of the different distribution channels that are possible. The simplest one would be manufacturer to consumer, and the basic example is where we have entrepreneurs who are perhaps making products out of beads or products out of waste, and they're selling it in a flea market or a weekend market, and we consumers go buy from them. It's the simplest mode of distribution channel. There is no intermediaries involved in that. The most longest or the complex one might be the one where a product is sourced from somewhere, manufactured somewhere, and is sent somewhere else. So that would be an example of the longest supply chain with different channels and partners involved. Now, what is a channel of distribution? This is basically the route that is taken by the supplies of raw materials, or if it's parts or equipment that are needed to make those products. It is also finished products or services from one point to another, which is POO to POC. When we say direct channel, a direct channel is where your goods and services are sold and are sent directly to the customer, like I gave you the example of the first one. Definitions: indirect channel, where you saw a lot of intermediaries and distribution centers, the involvement of these temporary units that forms an indirect channel in supply chain. Warehouses where your finished goods are stored or they are packaged and kept until it is needed by the customers or until it is due for its delivery date. Distribution center is where it's sort of a facility, or you can say like your a storehouse, where we have to make sure that we store our products temporarily and they are only received and sent off according to customers' orders. So there will be invoices, there would be proper documentation that would say when and where the products are going to be stored and when and where they're going to be released. For example, you would have seen distribution centers of Woolworths in one of the places. I think it's that side by Tableview. They have a big distribution center. Similarly, they have a Click somewhere as well. And then those distribution centers are places where all the products are sourced from different parts of the country, sometimes overseas. And as and when each of these stores need, the products are transferred and distributed to those respective stores. So when we're speaking about more number of intermediaries and channels, the more we include them or the longer they become, there is involvement of middlemen, which keeps on increasing. So obviously, what will happen to the product price? The price of the product will keep on increasing and it will become more expensive because it involves a lot of transactions. It involves a, a lot of salaries that needs to be paid. Then coming to transport. Now, transportation from supplier to manufacturer or from manufacturer to customer can be in various ways. It can be a private transport operation. It can be through third-party logistics as well. As simple I explained, private transport is companies' own vehicles or vehicles that they have leased for a certain period of time. If it is third party, then it is making sure that you use transport from professionals or companies that have these outsourcing services that provide you their transport vehicles depending on what amount, quantity, and where it needs to be transported. So this basically is, in a nutshell, the definition of supply chain management, where with close coordination and collaboration of supply partners, which are your suppliers, intermediaries, and third-party service providers and customers, the products the process is effectively planned, managed, and the outcome is obviously making sure that we comply with the 5 rights of logistics and give the end product to the consumers. So with demands with technological upgradement, supply chain practices have become service-based, which means they are applied both in public and private sector. Supply chain partners make sure that they don't make any kind of mistakes or any kind of loopholes in between, because that just doesn't affect them, it affects the whole chain of supply partners. It's almost like imagining a circle where there are nodes, 5 nodes or 6 nodes in the circle, and each node is managed by each partner. So if anything goes wrong, you are not going to make sure that the circle is maintained in its effectiveness in all ways at all times. So each of their performance and at the same time, each of their mistakes affect all the supply chain partners that are part of that business. And then obviously that would lead to unhappy customers. Now, with the amount of online companies that offer cheaper price products, quick deliveries, and so on, it is very easy to lose your customers. So the primary focus needs to always be satisfying customers' needs and making sure that at the same time you generate enough profit for yourself. Now, different companies follow different supply chain modes. There are different systems, softwares that are put in place by companies which works for them. So it might not work for one company which working for the other one. And constantly there is a competition among the supply chains. Now, a supply chain partner can be part of a supply chain A, and they can also be part of supply chain B, because you are, as companies, allowed to do multiple businesses with each other. But to ensure that everyone involved in each of these supply chains are doing their job effectively is the key. Now, for supply chain, there are supply chain drivers. Now, each of the supply chain drivers again have the aim of those twin goals, which is efficiency and effectiveness. The first 3 drivers are called as logistical drivers, and the other 3 are called as cross-functional drivers. Again, the reason for their existence is to make sure that they have optimum responsiveness and optimum efficiency. Now, this figure here shows the 6 supply chain drivers. Okay, so that is your facility, that is inventory and transportation, and hence they are called as your logistical drivers because they involve more or less logistics. Then the next 3 is your information, sourcing, and pricing. That is your cross-functional drivers because they are the ones who are providing information for these logistical drivers to work effectively. If you see facilities, it says the location. It can be your location in a manufacturing unit. It can be assemblies, distribution centers. Then we have inventories. Inventory can be your raw materials, semi-raw materials. It can be finished and unfinished goods as well. Transportation, we just spoke about them, can be privately owned or third-party logistics, ensuring movement of products from point A to point B. Information is all these that we're talking about, discussing, that has been stored and being processed constantly in the form of data, is analyzed by different supply chain partners, and the informations are rightly and simultaneously available to all the supply chain partners so that everybody knows what's going on. Sourcing is your making sure that what is your raw materials, where do you need them from, do you have it in-house, or are you going to source it from somewhere, will it be outsourced, if so where? So sourcing is all those strategic decisions that you need to make sure. Pricing obviously depends on the economy, it depends on demand and supply. It also involves if the product involves any kind of overseas transactions and how the economical scenarios are in those countries. Strategic decisions that needs to be made if we are using facilities to make sure that to have the most effective and um, cheaper cost involved. So the facilities needs to be close proximity. They need to be close to each other to make sure that you are constantly expanding your production facility, you increasing the capacity. So you make sure that you have available space to serve markets that are far away from you by having storage places, by having um, the ability to set up new production facilities that can cater to your distant markets. To maintain the number of facilities or units, when I'm saying facilities, it's more manufacturing units. So to make sure that you're maintaining these units, or in order to add more, you have to have the ability to manage those facilities. Um, if you were to stop production at the current facility because maybe it is not generating enough profit, and to use a facility in a different place because of the product range that you need to make, or to make sure that you are making yourself available to distance markets. So the ideal would be to either sell the existing facility or take a lease to a new, or go for a new facility with a lease. Okay. Um, okay. This is just more information where how supply chain networks are strongly related, because it involves channels of distribution, it involves flow of materials inbound and outbound, and also upwards and downwards in the supply chain. It relates to decisions regarding infrastructure, also for overall capacity. It involves storage and transformation. It also involves selecting the right members in the supply chain. Now, someone comes and says, okay, I supply fabrics of such and such quality to company A, B, and you are company C. So this is what my catalog looks like, and you, or will you be willing to make me as a member of your supply chain? You cannot just go and say, yes, you are a member because you are a supplier. So it needs wise and careful selection of members, any member, to form part of your supply chain, because being a good supply chain member directly affects your profit, your performance, and your image in the market. Again, when strategic decisions are made, is someone's mic on? I hear a noise in the background. Okay. So when strategic decisions are made, these are based on the following, which is what is the core product or the service that the company is about, what is their strategy, who they're targeting to, or what is the source of their supply, what is the source of their products that they, or raw materials that they're getting from, what are the facilities that are available, where are they located, what is the capacity of those facilities, and what is the market and supply allocation for that product. So based on that, a supply chain network is designed. Because if all of these are smaller in number, then the network obviously becomes small with very few supply chain partners. But if the network is bigger, then it involves more supply chain partners. Now, steps in logistics processes. So, for example, there is order that is being placed. So, what happens first of all? A customer order is initiated in the process. So, if you go, if you just think yourself back into the earlier slides where I had a outbound and inbound flow chart, and what happens in there is first we see if there is an order from a customer for a particular season or for a particular style. Depending on that, a production schedule is drawn up against the actual orders that has been given. And how is that based on it? Based on sales forecast or making sure that you check in-store availability of the materials, and then make sure that you go reached out to the suppliers or to purchase the items that you don't have in stock as a manufacturing unit. Then on receipt of that, your basic cutting room rules, inspection and management of these suppliers, where they need to be stored in the storehouse or which one goes where, that happens in step 4. And after that, the production happens where the products are produced or the services is rendered to the customer as per the production schedule. Once the products are ready, they are correctly packaged, depending if it is being transferred locally or globally. And then there is a transportation carrier involved who is responsible for moving the finished goods directly to the customer, the wholesaler, or to the retailer, depending whichever is the network of distribution channel. And then finally managing the payment when the products have been received, when the products are already by the end user, then that's when the payment happens. So which is almost like a backward process. So then they pay the retailers to the wholesalers, to the manufacturers, and then ultimately the manufacturers can pay back to the suppliers once they are being paid. So these are the general steps in a logistics process. The value added role of logistics is obviously the intention or the willingness to pay for a product or service is determined by the utility, means how much the product is used or will be used, or its utility depending on its demand from a customer or a person who's demanding it. Now, what is utility? Utility basically refers to the satisfaction that is obtained from using a product or from consuming a product or service. Now, there can be 4 types of utilities that the people in logistics differentiate. They are time, form, place, and possession. Okay, now what is time utility? It means that as customers, you make sure that you utilize when they can buy the goods they require at the exact time. So, for example, you would only buy products that you need for summer in summer, you're not going to buy them in winter, and vice versa. So, being, for example, at a restaurant, or you need a car, and that's when you actually go to the dealers. You need something at the shops, that's when you go to the shops. So time utility is also something that applies when a manufacturer receives the parts and materials that is needed in the production process at the time when they are required. There is a spelling mistake, it's time and not time. Um, then we have form utility. Form utility is where raw materials or different parts that have been transformed by the production process into the products or into their desired form, and that's when they are ordered by customers. So the form utility, giving them the desired shape or form depending on when they are ordered. So for example, the customers who have demanded a cell phone with certain specifications or in a specific color, They receive this cell phone as and when they are specified. So if you go place for an order for a cell phone and you say, I need it with such and such color, they say, okay, it will take 4 weeks or 3 weeks for delivery, because then that's when the form utility works, because they go back and make sure that they make it in the right color that the customer has desired. So that is your form utility. Then the next we have is place utility. Now, what is place utility? This is created when the finished goods are required by consumers, and that's when they are moved to a place at which they can buy the product. So, making sure that the product is arrived at the right place, which is in the market, and that's when the consumers go and buy it. A manufacturer that has ordered materials to be used in production process and has requested them to be delivered at a particular and a specific time and place. So he experiences both the time and place utility when the supplies are delivered as it has been requested. And then we have possession utility. Now, possession utility is when the value is added by the customer who is being satisfied and is happy to take possession or ownership of the item that was made for him and is now delivered to him or her. So if a person takes possession of an item that he or she wanted and is paid for, that person experiences possession utility. So these are the 4 kinds of utility. Okay, now then moving on to the characteristics of customer service. Now all that we are doing is for the customer. Now what needs to be ensured, or what we need to make sure that our customers are satisfied, is rendering effective customer services to make sure that we get effective feedback or after sales service, or make sure that the 5 rights of logistics are simultaneously being provided, to make sure that we have competitive representatives who will speak to the buyers, who will speak to um, the front desk executives and get right feedback, so that they understand if the products are being consistent, if they are reliable, and they are being provided with the acceptable lead time. And what are the indicators that we measure for customer feedback? It is of various kinds. One of them is to understand the percentage of consignments that are received at the correct place. How much of it has been received at the correct place says or indicates if a customer is satisfied or not. If they were all delivered in time, or if there were delays, then percentage of consignments received on the scheduled time and date. Were they delivered in the right time? Were they delivered damage free? Were they complete in order in every aspect accurately? And finally, if the orders were billed accurately. If all these factors have been kept in mind, then these are in itself indicators for measuring customer feedback and understanding if a customer was satisfied or not. Now, lastly, to understand that these logistics have been effective and they have created a revenue, or we can say money, for the companies. So by making sure that these 4 areas have been covered, which is revenue growth, which making sure that there is constant growth in revenue, there is constant increase in profit. Then it's also by operating cost reduction, making sure that you adopt effective ways where the logistic costs don't add up too much but are the most cost effective. Then fixed capital efficiency, where you make sure that the logistics activities are capital intensive, and as they require large investments in capital assets such as your warehouses or vehicles and material handling, it is important to make sure that these assets are effectively utilized. so that the company can get a good return on the investment that has been made. And then working capital efficiency is where we need to make sure that if companies are financially liquid at all times, or that if they have enough cash to pay for its day-to-day operating costs and expenses, and to make sure that they are not um, short of funding and that they are able to meet ends. Even it would mean paying salaries to the employees, it would mean maintaining health and hygiene in the workplace. Okay, so this is the chapter about introduction to supply chain management. I see there was a question, can suppliers put insurance on their products? Yes, that is what we're going to read further in supplier management. All the products, once the business is or once a customer is placing an order, from then and there itself, supply chain partners come together and they sort of finance, no, finance won't be the right word, sort of budget the order, what the order looks like, what are the possible damages that can happen, what are the possible thefts that can happen, what are the critical issues that can come up, and then keeping that in mind, in their own capacities, respective capacities, they insure their products. So as such, you will know any manufacturing unit or any company has its own insurance to save themselves from any accidents or hazards that might happen. And when it's being transported, the third party logistics that they sign their contract with each of these both parties or the third party logistics provider have their own insurance that covers for any likelihood of damage, theft, accidents. Their stock is covered, because remember, this is all the um, I mean, the revenue that have been generated, yet they haven't got the profit back. So it is almost everything that the company has put effort into in every form. So they are insured both from the buyer's end, the third logistics, while they're transporting it under their risk and responsibility. So they insure it as well. So I hope that answers your question. Any questions from anyone so long? Okay, if not, then that's fine. I have in the background also via Blackboard, make sure that I am taking attendance. So whoever is joining the session and what time they're leaving the session, how long you have been in the session, that's all tracked under Blackboard. So you don't have to worry about attendance, neither do I. As the departmental rule of minimum 75% attendance is mandatory, that applies for here for these online sessions as well. Towards the end of the term, if I find anyone who is not complying with that, I will then unfortunately not be able to mark that students' marks for that particular term or for the subject in general. I don't see any other questions. Just a reminder again, next Monday, before the class, you will, even before Monday, you will have your next chapter's recording screencast ready. I will send you a notification from Blackboard to your emails as well. So you will have it before time. You will have the first half an hour in the morning to even listen to it and put down your questions in a notebook or somewhere. So when we have our live session, we can discuss them. Then again, from next week also, I'll try to get someone for afternoon slots for about an hour where you can do your classwork activities further on as part of your tutorial session, perhaps via WhatsApp. So if the class decides to carry on that session in your own class WhatsApp group, that's fine with me. If not, then I will ask the teaching assistant to create a separate WhatsApp group and then you all can join that group and then be part of these tutorial activities for the next few weeks. Okay, I'm going to stop recording this session. If there are